Investigation into whether Donald Trump's efforts to remain in power despite losing the election is spreading to new states. New Mexico's Secretary of State is the latest to confirm she met with federal prosecutors earlier this year. Michigan's Secretary of State says she has also been in contact with the DOJ since speaking with Jack Smith this spring.
We have been turning over every piece of evidence from the false slate of electors, which we shared in early 2021, through my interview and several others' interview with the prosecuting team in March of this year.
And in Arizona, the Secretary of State's office says it's received a subpoena from the special counsel asking about 2 lawsuits involving efforts to overturn the 2020 results. So where does this sprawling case go next? Joining me now to discuss, MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin. Lisa, as far as we know, none of these election officials have actually appeared before the January 6th grand jury. Why do you think prosecutors are sticking to interviews, subpoenas for now?
I think none of these people, Alicia, are people that we understand to be targets of the investigation, and some of them might not even be necessary as witnesses. However, for the completeness of the investigation, it's important for the Department of Justice to essentially smoke them out, know what they would say if they were called as a witness by a defendant, and corroborate their understanding of documents that may already be in their possession. For example, we know that all 7 slates of fake electors sent documents to the National Archives. Many of those documents passed their way through Secretaries of State's offices first, and in some cases, as in Arizona, that's how they got to be part of a referral. The Arizona Secretary of State essentially said to NARA, are you guys going to do something about this? There's something off here. So my guess is that they're not needed yet as grand jury witnesses, but they could be, and they want to understand what these folks would say.
Lisa, I think you'll appreciate that less than 2 weeks ago, I was on air talking about this story and said, I think it's strange that no one is investigating what happened in Arizona. So I was quite pleased to see this headline, NBC learning that Arizona's Attorney General is launching her own investigation into the state's false electors. What could that mean then for the special counsel's case?
Well, it's a little bit head-scratching, Alicia, isn't it? Particularly since we're in the summer of 2023. Why is it just now that Arizona's Attorney General is launching her own investigation? Part of that has to do with party change. Arizona's former Attorney General before this last election was a guy named Mark Brnovich, who, although he ultimately concluded there was no fraud in the election, he wasn't necessarily eager to prosecute or even make an example of himself among Trump folks, right? He just didn't want to be an outlier there. So Chris Mays comes into office and says, I want to do something about this. But the other thing it might signal to us is that, at least in its first iteration, the Department of Justice, as it has been in the records investigation, is going to go after the folks at the top, not the folks at the bottom initially, particularly because time is running out to bring an indictment against former President Trump and have that case tried in time for the November 2024 election.
Well, let's talk about some of those people at the top, or at least some of the people in the inner circle. You have the New York Times reporting that Jared Kushner was one of multiple witnesses asked whether Trump genuinely believed his own stolen election claims. Kushner, how important is that evidence of Trump's mindset?
You know, it's one of many people who was around Trump in the post-election period who heard him say things. And so for every Jared Kushner, there's an Alyssa Farah Griffin who was on the receiving end of Trump saying to her, can you believe I effing lost to this guy? Hope Hicks, also in her testimony before the January 6th committee, testified to hearing the president essentially concede that he had lost. But in her telling of it, it was always followed up by, I can't believe I lost. There's no way I lost. So she sort of played it straight down the middle. The Department of Justice is going to collect all of those stories. But what they're particularly interested in is the stories of those who heard him say that he lost, like General Milley or Alyssa Farah Griffin. And what that shows about his intent, that he nonetheless continued with numerous schemes to overturn the results of the election, despite conceding his loss.
Lisa, I am impressed by your faith in yourself to reference the expletive without accidentally saying it. I cannot say the same for myself. And as usual, you have Trump trying to stall his classified documents trial. What are DOJ's chances of delivering speedy justice, given that his favorite tactic is to delay, delay, delay?
Well, it's not just that it's his favorite tactic is to delay, but we're dealing with a wild card here and Judge Aileen Cannon. No one could quite believe that she was the person to whom this case was assigned. And given her history with former President Trump, in this investigation. It remains to be seen whether she'll do what I think most federal judges would do here, which is to set a definitive trial date. I've never seen a defendant do what Donald Trump and Walt Nauta with him are doing here, which is to say it's not even appropriate to set a trial date because there are so many things that have to come before that. The Department of Justice's pushback, which was in very forceful terms in its briefing this week, was both appropriate and persuasive. It's my hope that on Tuesday of this week, when we have our first pretrial hearing in front of Judge Cannon, that she will set a trial date. It might not be one to the Department of Justice's liking, but it probably won't be one to Donald Trump's liking either. If